But for now, we're just going to talk about the essential software that you might want to start with. So make sure, first of all, you've got either some good speakers to monitor what you're doing, or you have some good headphones. So this time we're going to talk a little bit more about what's going on inside the computer here. So as a film composer, it's really important that you have good sample libraries to start with, meaning you have virtual instruments that have, the sound of violins, flutes, guitars, percussion, all those sorts of things for your MIDI mockups later. And we're going to talk a lot more about those later on in further lessons. But for now, we're just going to talk about the essential software that you might want to start with. So make sure, first of all, you've got either some good speakers to monitor what you're doing, or you have some good headphones. And these headphones right here are the Sony 7506s. These are pretty industry standard, nothing fancy, but they've got a nice even response where it won't lie to you about how big or small the low end or how bright the high end is going to sound. It's just a good starting pair of headphones. And once we're listening to what's going on in the computer here, what I've done was open some MIDI tracks. And so very different than the audio tracks where we receive live audio signal. With MIDI, these are digital virtual instruments that were either electronically created or pre-recorded notes. So instead of having a live piano right here, somebody sampled the sound of a live piano and made it accessible through the synthesizer here. And so, when we're in this environment, we have all kinds of stuff at our disposal, like the piano. We can even move over, do some legato strings, or maybe some nice punchy short strings or staccatos. Something like that. And the next question should be, well, what kind of software do you want to work with? And there's a lot of options for you out there. I happen to work with Logic Pro. I've been working in Logic for about 15 or so years now. It served me quite well. It's a wonderful, stable MIDI environment for doing mockups. One of probably the industry standard for music software is a program called Pro Tools. It's probably best known for its handling of live audio, so big live recordings, and it has great tools for editing that stuff and mixing. But it's also come a long way in being able to do MIDI mockups and great virtual instrument productions as well. And then Motu, in fact, speaking of this interface here, Motu makes one of the other industry standard pieces of software for a film composer, and that's called Digital Performer. It's a fantastic piece of software. It does everything that Pro Tools and Logic can do. And DP, Digital Performer, happens to have really amazing features when it comes to spotting and locking frames of film to bars of music. And if you're more of a PC Windows user, I would recommend considering some software like Cubase, which I think was one of the most interesting and powerful MIDI platforms I've ever worked in. While I'm not a PC user myself, when I have experimented with Cubase, I found it just fantastic. And so I would highly recommend it if that's the world you're in. Same with Sonar. I found for PC people, Sonar was a really wonderful and very intuitive piece of software to use. And then there's some free and, or I would say, how about some cheaper all the way to free versions of the software out there. In fact, Pro Tools has a great solution. Pro Tools First is free. You're limited to 16 tracks of activity, but you can still download Pro Tools First today and get right to work and have a functional DAW setup. I would say Ableton is increasingly good, FL Studio, and then to the cheap to free, you get like Reaper and Audacity. I think Audacity, I don't remember if it has MIDI capability, but you could at least record live that way. And then the next major subject is sample libraries. Where do you go to get good sounds? Now we're going to do a more in-depth tutorial on sample mockups later on. That said, I just wanted to drop a few names while we're at this stage of assembling the goods for our DAW setup. If you wanted to start composing today and really produce some interesting and really good, believable MIDI mockups, you could download something like Pro Tools first and then go straight over to Spitfire Labs. So Spitfire Audio is a fantastic company making beautiful samples for all kinds of hybrid electronic and orchestral sample libraries. And if you go to their labs page, they've got something like 25 or 30 free downloads you could download immediately and get to work using. And if you're going to spend a little money, one of my favorite companies is one called 8Dio. So that's number 8DIO. They make some of the most versatile and I think dynamic and, for my ears, just very usable orchestral and hybrid electronic sample libraries. The way their strings just happen to perform, like the legatos and sustains, are just some of the most believable to me. And of course, Spitfire Audio is just amazing. Cinesamples is one of my favorite companies. If you're looking for someone asked me recently, what's one of the sample libraries that I couldn't ever live without? And when I thought about it for a second, I realized, right, I think I know which one that is. When it comes to electronic sounds and electronic synthesis production tools, one of my favorites is Omnisphere and Omnisphere 2. Those two were big game changers in my music production and sample library development process. It's one that after years and years of using them, I still come back to almost daily for their sounds, whether it's just effects, instruments, or just texturing in the background. They're one of my favorite companies out there, up there with 8Dio. Of course, LA Scoring Strings is one of my go-tos for strings. You're all probably familiar with East West. They've got a great online subscription program for $30 a month. You can have access to an enormous amount of their libraries. And Native Instruments, of course, is one of the great industry standards. So that's the conclusion of this lesson. I wanted to introduce you to the basic components of a digital audio workstation and make sure you know that what the essentials are you're going to need to get started today as a film composer. It could even just be getting your sample libraries set and getting Pro Tools first and starting for free right out of the box, and then gradually adding your microphones and a preamp, or borrowing a preamp and interface and microphones for a while. But it doesn't take a lot to get started. So please don't let that slow you down or hold you back from beginning this journey today. If you'd like to learn more film scoring tips like these, sign up for free, and I promise you, these lessons will help you on your journey to becoming an accomplished film composer.